welcome to WION The World is One. I am Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates and stories from the world's most volatile region. Well, the winds of change are blowing in West Asia. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is visiting the United Arab Emirates, and this is his first visit in almost 10 years. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett just wrapped up his visit to Bahrain, and it is the first visit of an Israeli head of government to the Gulf nation. The dual visits signal at a changing West Asia, one where powerhouses choose economy and stability over age-old rivalries. We tell you more.
They say in politics there are no permanent friends or enemies, just permanent interests. But what happens to those interests when you have decades of rocky relations? Do you sweep them under the rug and never discuss them, or do you confront the past with eyes on a new future? West Asian leaders have chosen the former. They are meeting and greeting, but without confronting their past conflicts. Like Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is on a reconciliation tour to the UAE, his first visit since 2013, Erdogan's mission was straightforward: rebuild Turkey's relations with the Arab world. In Abu Dhabi, he was welcomed by Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. They held talks, they signed 13 agreements, and announced a new era of friendship. Why is this visit significant? Because the UAE was Erdogan's bitter rival. It all started with the Arab Spring of 2011. Erdogan supported the Muslim Brotherhood and Sunni Islamists. He plotted to overthrow the Gulf monarchies. Since then, Turkey and the UAE are enemies. In 2016, this rivalry peaked. Erdogan was nearly ousted in a bloody coup attempt. He survived, but he accused the UAE of funding the coup. But on Monday, we saw none of that animosity.
The progress that the United Arab Emirates have made under the foundational leadership and vision of the late Sheikh Zayed is really admirable. One of the examples that reflects the Emirates' advances is no doubt the Dubai Expo. I find Expo 2020's Connecting Minds, Creating the Future theme extremely meaningful.
But what changed? Turkey is now dealing with instability and the pandemic. Its economy is struggling to stay afloat, so Erdogan needs a lifeline. And the United Arab Emirates seems to be the perfect one. But what will Abu Dhabi get in exchange? The Gulf nation may seek concessions. For years, the UAE has punched well above its size. Its foreign policy and intervention in wars has made it an important player in the region. So now Abu Dhabi is leading as the peacemaker, raising the specter of a game-changing quid pro quo. In neighboring Bahrain, similar scenes were playing out. For years, the Arab states banded together against Israel. But since the US brokered Abraham Accords in 2020, winds of change are blowing in the region. Nations are choosing economy and stability over age-old rivalries. Like Naftali Bennett, who just wrapped his visit to Bahrain, this is a landmark trip for the Israeli Prime Minister, the first public visit by an Israeli head of government to Bahrain. It comes 17 months after the two nations normalized relations. Bennett's visit signals at a rapid realignment of West Asian politics. Several Arab states have normalized relations with Israel since the Abraham Accords, which were signed in 2020. This includes the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco.
I think our goal in this visit is to turn it from government to people peace. and to convert it from ceremonies to substance.
To substance, exactly.
You want to fill this relationship with substance and energy and drive.
Israel and Bahrain also share a common ally, the United States. The Gulf nation hosts the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. Bennett also met U.S. 5th Fleet Commander Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, stressing its role in maintaining regional stability in the face of threats. The recent meetings signal a larger regional shift. West Asia is going through some serious realignment. Some old foes are learning to live with each other. A superpower is recoiling after decades of interference. And others are vying for more power in the region. Winds of change are truly blowing here. But after the dust settles, what will it mean for West Asia? West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Don't go anywhere, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visits the Turkish and UAE pavilions at Dubai Expo 2020 on Turkey's National Day, during his 2-day visit of the United Arab Emirates. United States and Iran officials suggest that the nuclear talks are nearing conclusion. Iranian negotiator says that the deal is closer than ever, as the US State Department stresses that days ahead will be decisive. Gaza's Ministry of Health has opened its largest field hospital for COVID patients in the Strip. The hospital was built with the support from the UAE. Palestinians gathered at the Unknown Soldier Square in Gaza City to protest against Jewish settlers evicting other Palestinian families from their homes in the Flashpoint Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. A job advertisement to recruit 30 female train drivers in Saudi Arabia has attracted over 28,000 applicants as the United Kingdom opens up more opportunities to women. Israel Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has announced the end of the vaccine Green Pass, adding that it was a good time to ease pandemic control restrictions.
Lebanon's Hezbollah have just released a new video showing off their alpine warfare skills. Hezbollah fighters swapped their usual colors with all-white snow camouflage gear. Now this comes at a time when Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah has claimed that the group has the ability to convert thousands of rockets into precision strike missiles. We tell you more.
All white snow camouflage gear. Target practice on skis and snowmobiles. And drills in the snowy mountains. This is not any formal high-tech military drill. These are Hezbollah fighters showing off their alpine warfare skills in a new video. The video, released by the Iran-backed group, has taken Lebanese social media by storm. Some compared it to the Winter Olympics. Others talked about this unit outgunning the National Army. Ironically, the Lebanese army released a video at the same time, showing its alpine unit performing drills in the snow. It comes at a time when the Hezbollah claims that it has started manufacturing drones. Leader Hassan Nasrallah even said they can convert rockets into precision strike missiles.
We have the ability to convert our thousands of rockets into precision strike missiles. We started doing that years ago. We converted a large number of our rockets into precision strike missiles. We do not need them to be sent from Iran.
The Hezbollah are currently eyeing more Sunni seats as the country gears up for its parliamentary elections. With former Prime Minister Saad Hariri's exit from politics, the Iran-backed group hopes to gain the seats that were once claimed by Hariri's future movement. The Hariri family has led the future movement for 3 decades. This is Lebanon's leading Sunni political group. But Hariri's exit has left a vacuum within the Sunni political landscape. Lebanon's next parliamentary elections are set to take place in May, the first since the protests in 2019. It comes at a time when the country is reeling under multiple crises. From deadly violence in the capital to a crippling financial crisis. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
The 2030 vision of Mohammed bin Salman is clear. Move away from oil, fund giant infrastructural projects. But this requires deep pockets. Just how deep? How rich is Saudi Arabia? And can petrodollars fund the Crown Prince's ambitious plan?
Artificial moons and flying taxis in the middle of the desert. A carbon-free country with 1 million inhabitants. Multi-billion-dollar bets on high-tech companies. Saudi Arabia is diversifying its economy, and footing the bill is its sovereign wealth fund, often known as Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund. The once sleepy fund that bankrolled the kingdom is now a global investment vehicle, one driven by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The plan is simple, a 5-year mission to double the fund's assets to a mammoth $1 trillion and a move to create 1.8 million direct and indirect jobs. MBS's goal is to wean the economy off its dependence on oil. And the PIF is now at the center of this reform. The PIF's finance are formidable. It is among the largest sovereign funds in the world. It's been a windfall of sorts. Assets rose from $150 billion in 2015 to over $400 billion in 2020. Currently, the PIF has invested in a number of enterprises, including Uber, Boeing, Citigroup, Facebook, Disney, and even led a consortium that purchased Premier League club Newcastle United. The backbone of this fund is the Saudi Aramco, a bountiful oasis for the desert kingdom. It is the main source of money for the House of Saud, which still owns 94% of company shares. This time, the Crown Prince has transferred 4% of Aramco's stakes to the PIF, a transfer that will enrich the fund by nearly $80 billion. This comes as the kingdom is demystifying its finances, a move that is unheard of among Gulf countries. But the PIF is not any other ordinary sovereign fund. Its riskier investment profile makes secrecy an issue. The fund's green credentials could also take a hit by lumping Aramco with other green projects like NEOM. The timing is crucial here. The world is shifting its focus away from oil. Saudi Arabia's economy is reeling from the pandemic, and there are not enough jobs for the young population. So now Riyadh is aiming for a strong economic recovery in 2022. The idea is to use the PIF to fund mega infrastructure projects and pump money into the local economy till 2025. Currently, Saudi Arabia needs the sovereign fund, but not as much as oil. The kingdom still derives half of its income from liquid gold. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
The Mediterranean island of Cyprus is grappling with an influx of asylum seekers. Now, most of them migrated from Syria, leaving behind their homeland in a hope for a stable life. But the village of Clarakos has now become the center point for tensions. 1/4 of the residents are refugees, and while local authorities talk of ghettoization and seek to move some of them, the Syrian refugees refuse to leave, and they say they have nowhere else to go. We tell you more.
This is the coastal village of Clarakos, located in the Mediterranean nation of Cyprus. Clarakos is home to 7,000 people. Out of them, 1,700 are asylum seekers. The village has become a safe haven for Syrian migrants. They arrived here hoping for a stable life. But Clarakos is now at the center of new tensions. Located on a hill overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, the complex is formerly known as St. Nicholas Elegant Residence. It consists of about 20 peach-colored residential blocks with terracotta tiles. But its luster began to fade following a 2018 financial dispute. When the pandemic began, the owner began renting out the flats at cheaper rates. So many Syrian refugees moved in. The tensions worsened in January this year after a fight between two refugees who lived here. Since then, Clarakos residents have staged protests, carrying hostile signs against the Syrian refugees. Local authorities are now calling the complex a ghetto. They are seeking to relocate some of the refugees.
And we have too many problems because many teams of the refugees are making some problems. And actually we want to break this ghetto because we think it's better if the refugees split in Cyprus.
1 month ago, the local authorities declared the site unfit for habitation. It then cut off the water supply to 250 apartments. But the Syrians renting flats here refuse to leave. They say they have nowhere else to go.
The water, electricity and the internet have been cut off. We bring water from outside the compound in jerry cans. Look at the jerry cans here. We can't make ends meet. There is no work and humanitarian aid has been stopped.
We are asylum seekers and we have nothing to do with the problems that have taken place here. The problems concern only 3 or 4 people, but we are now paying a heavy price because they have stopped all humanitarian assistance.
Cyprus has been at the front line of migrant flows in Europe. Over 12,000 Syrians have sought refuge here since 2011. While Syrians have been part of the Cypriot community for decades, those living here are dealing with an environment of growing intolerance. They are dealing with racial profiling and discrimination. Cyprus is one of the few countries restoring diplomatic ties with Syria. They have reopened their embassy in Damascus. At some point, the nation may want to send the refugees back. But Syrians living here do not want to go back. They would rather live without water supply than return to their homeland. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Scattered across Iraq lie more than 100 opulent palaces and villas. All were built by former dictator Saddam Hussein. While some of them are still in use, others lie in ruins as Iraq struggles to make use of these grand palaces. We tell you more.
Welcome to the other gardens of Babylon, a stone's throw from the ancient Mesopotamian city. This is where Saddam Hussein erected one of his many palaces. And this park here was the late dictator's secret garden. In many places, the initials SH are still visible. His profile is engraved on the walls, like that of the Mesopotamian emperor he idolized. This is one of the many palaces Saddam Hussein built in Iraq. Scattered across the war-torn nation lie more than 100 opulent palaces and villas, all built by former dictator Saddam Hussein. Some are in use, others in ruins. Their marble columns, ornate carvings and gaudy furniture reflect the megalomania of the Iraqi leader who visited some of them only once or twice. Most of the palaces were looted during the Iraqi war. The thieves scavenged all they could carry, even ripping electric cables out of the walls. Since then, only a handful have been given a second lease of life. They're often turned into military bases or public administration office. Some rare ones become museums.
In all countries around the world, old royal and presidential palaces are reused and converted into museums accessible to all citizens.
Most of them continue to lie empty. This is because the cost of renovation is too high. Red tape and entrenched craft spell other hurdles.
There are large and grand palaces, so their renovation requires huge sums. But there are smaller palaces which require less cost for renovation.
In Baghdad, 3 palaces now house the presidency and the prime minister's offices. The sumptuous Al-Faw complex is home to the private American university. Al-Faw was built near the airport to once house Saddam's VIP guests. Now, its stone and marble buildings are home to auditoriums, amphitheaters and a food court.
Was really destroyed. The tile work was hanging down, the windows were all broken out. There were birds flying around, snakes on the floor, literally. And so it was very messed up. And so it took us a while to renovate. All of these other buildings, we had to go in and do substantial renovation.
In the southern city of Basra, 3 palaces remain. 2 are used by Hashid al-Shabi, a paramilitary alliance. The third has become a prestigious antiquities museum. To date, Basra is the only Iraqi province to have transformed a palace into a heritage building. The Iraqi government now owns all the dictator's former residences. Some think the palaces should be restored. Others believe they should be left to fall apart. These buildings were once a symbol of Saddam's dictatorship. Now they lie in ruins, much like the war-torn nation. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
West Asia is beautiful. It is full of culture and oddities. In our next segment, Curiosities, we bring you some heartwarming stories from the region. That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, and you're watching WION. World is One.